If you caught last week's video or my short for collage paper 81, you know something went wrong. I was very interested in what was left on the plate, however, and decided to use it. Since things couldn't be matched up to create a cohesive look as far as matching up the pattern that was there, I decided to go with a completely different color, Liquitex Basics Deep Violet. I tried to apply it in a thin coat, avoiding putting too much over what was already there. But again, doing a single pull, the bottom layer on the plate will be the top layer of my print, and I'm putting down this purple layer to be a base for my texture. I will be, as I have in last week's videos, pressing the artificial flower into the wet paint to take away some paint for my marks. One area was a little thinner than the rest, and I did use a roll-off sheet for paint that was on the brayer in order to make my layer thinner. As I've mentioned before, once you get to a certain level of paint with a clean brayer, you start pulling the paint back off, which was ideal for this and can be very useful. I thought about using the single layer of flour, but I didn't think it would be interesting enough and probably rather messy. Tried to straighten up the petals on this a bit because they've been bending over and covering the center. Started making my flower texture, which I have sped up for you, as it can be a little slow as I'm thinking about it, and it's fun, and it's something, if you haven't tried, you may want to try. I will try things like this again on the silicone mat, and perhaps other surfaces that I have heard can be used as inexpensive alternatives to the gel plate. The gel plate set I have is still the best value I can find, but no, gel plates are not cheap. That fun shape piece of plastic is also part of my artificial flower. That was dry, and I started with cadmium yellow light hue, as I had been using all last week. Spread it around some before I added my cadmium red light hue. And yes, I'll say it again this week, it's my orange. The tiny brayer works really well for having colors in particular areas and breaking up strong edges if you apply your paint directly to the gel plate. Those discernible edges I usually like to avoid. After everything was dry and forgetting my lesson of last week, but also knowing that matte medium can be done better than I did, I applied a layer of matte medium from a condiment bottle that needs some attention. Brayer did out well with the slightly larger brayer. Applied my cardstock, rubbed it down well. I do love my red Baron. Link will be in the description. And let it dry thoroughly. And this pull went much better. Interestingly, the purple was mostly subsumed by the yellow and orange. It created a really interesting color. The purple is only visible as itself in a few places. I really love how the new pattern turned out. For collage paper 82, I decided I wanted to try to repair or use the leftovers of something that went wrong. And I decided I would build off from that for this week's theme. I'm revisiting some things that I thought could have gone better or that there were questions about. As it turns out, the project I'm revisiting tonight was more controversial than I expected it to be. I mean, why would I want to do an image transfer onto packing tape when I can just slap a piece of magazine down on my collage anyway? In reply to those questions, I had said it's a matter of taste. If you think it's an interesting idea, try it. If you don't. There was a reply this week to my previous packing tape transfer video in which a very nice person said that they enjoyed this technique and they kept a pile of pieces in their collage stash. As you can see, I am taking two similar pieces and using one of the book pages I altered for my 5th week of my 100 collage papers. And yes, cutting out an image or text from a magazine, it's great. And making it translucent and putting in a collage is a different style. During my 100 collage papers, I am sharing things I enjoy doing, and I'm experimenting with things, either for the first time or expanding on my knowledge and sharing that with you to inspire you to try new things or to get back to the things you love. If you, like me, need to make art, make art. If you want to take a whole roll of packing tape and make magazine image transfers, have at it. If you think they are of no use to you, don't. But here is the difference. Both techniques have their place, and we all have our preferences. And wouldn't life be incredibly boring if we all liked only the same things? If we all only made the same things? Make art. Have fun. I am having a lot of fun. Collage paper 83 is some more collage fodder, but also used in a mini collage. All you need is an old magazine or old book pages from something you don't mind destroying, heavy packing tape, a container of warm water, and whatever you decide to adhere them to. I used a simple Elmer's glue stick for this video to demonstrate the ease and inexpensiveness of this simple project with a great translucent look. Translucent and transparent. Collage paper 84 is revisiting using my hot glue masks with acrylic ink. Last time I had put acrylic ink in spray bottles to see if I could make my own spray ink. And I could. I decided I wanted to spray them with a colored background this time because spraying them on white cardstock last time left them looking pretty basic. I did test it on scrap paper off camera first to make sure it was spraying okay. And as I sprayed the first one, realized that might be a little dark. These were roll-off sheets from the altered book pages, with the third from some other project, I'm not sure which, that I will be using to turn the masks over to use as stamps. But I hadn't realized that I had not put the flat side up when I sprayed them. Because which side you have up or down doesn't matter when you're just spraying ink over them. But it does matter to stamp, because all of my surface is not touching all of the surface of my paper. The wrinkle obviously didn't help this one, and the colors are a little similar. And this one, the color seems a little too light. So I think as far as using masks like this, it would be better with multiple layers. If I had a different shape mask, or even use those again, sprayed it again, I think that would be more interesting. Just a matter of taste. But back to my masks that were not effectively used as stamps. Flat sides are up, and I have added another painted book page. Quick but thorough spritzes, and I failed to mention that this is Liquitex Professional Iridescent Rich Bronze. It can be a little messy to pull these off when they are wet, but if they're not pulled off wet, they can't be used as stamps. And speeding up the stamping process. So as far as my hot glue masks, I still find this the least interesting way to use them as far as the results go. I did like them much better creating texture on the gel plate, but this does show promise, particularly using it not just in isolation. As I mentioned, in layers and maybe like with that one closer together, it does have some promise, but I still haven't hit upon a way I really like. But again, these are just the basics. Moving on. For collage paper 85, I decided to revisit a magazine image transfer on tissue paper using aluminum foil. My first aluminum foil image transfer was so surprising. It came out so well. I was not expecting it to work so well. But it turned out it was not color fast. So when I used it in a demo collage process, I ended up rubbing the image off the tissue paper as I was smoothing bubbles out from underneath it. So this time I will be using a spray fixative. At this point, I am using Liquitex Basics Payne's Gray for the image transfer. It is my preferred color for this. I applied too much, but got it knocked down well. The paint needs to be very thin for a decent image transfer. I applied the image face down and got another piece of paper so I could get up the extra paint from around the image. I peeled up the image and I could tell it wasn't ideal, but not bad. Next comes the pull with tissue paper. You can't let this dry because you need wet paint for the tissue paper to pick up. And yes, not as nice as my first, but not bad. You can get a better look on a white background. When it got to the point of adhering the image to the chosen substrate, I ended up also turning it over to be face down. If I had had more time, I would have tried both techniques, and that will have to be something for the future because the night I did this, I did not have time. And the night I'm recording this, I so seriously do not have the time. I'm using golden satin glazing liquid to adhere the image to my roll-off sheet, bright and light colored for contrast with the image. I use the glazing liquid for all of my tissue paper collaging. It was a tip from artist Maribeth Quinn. It has a nice finish. It's not too glossy. And it's also, of all the things I have tried, the one thing that doesn't make your fingers all sticky. It's great. And as you can see, I am not only not rubbing off the image as it's faced away from me, but I'm also not smudging or smearing it. So yes, it is possible to get a color fast tissue paper image transfer from aluminum foil, despite my first experience with the technique. Well, you may not be able to pull one, but you can make it color fast. Collage paper 86, phthalo blue, quinacridone magenta, and light pink for an update on a lace texture pull. Yeah, that is way too much paint. I may not need it to be as super thin as for an image transfer. However, way thinner than this. So I fought with that for a while, had some interesting roll-off sheets, and I'm going to jump ahead to what's next. Way less variegation than I intended, and my lace from before, laying it on the plate gently, and some gentle pressure, and paper, gentler than last time, and cutting out the earthquake. And that looks decent. Not perfect, but there's some better detail than last time with the thinner paint. After it was totally dry, I again applied too much paint. This time, transparent mixing white and cadmium yellow light hue. But as I said, too much, and the yellow went a long way. I should probably have used the titanium white. I got everything thinned down enough for the pull, applied the cardstock well, and let it dry. A common question I get is how long, and unfortunately there is not a specific answer for that, as drying time varies depending on the thickness of paint and things like the humidity and the temperature. Good rule of thumb is if the back is still quite cool, it is still wet. And there is a new take on lace texture on the gel plate. I had to follow up an opaque lace redo with a transparent lace redo, but changing things up this time by experimenting with acrylic ink on the gel plate. It was immediately evident that it was going to separate too much to make this worth fighting with, so I added some Liquitex Basics Silver. By the time I get to how I collage this to demonstrate the translucence, I completely forgot there was silver because the metallic disappears. I finally got it smoothed out enough, wrangled my lace into place, and as last time was gentle and used a piece of paper. Gentle but firm, I should say. There were some noticeable thin spots, but given the texture, I thought it would work fine, so I let it dry and then applied matte medium. I guess I was thinking about I didn't want the sheen of the gloss medium, but I wasn't thinking about the fact that it would actually make it a little less transparent. I do need to experiment with that more, but that seems to be the way it works. Given how things have been going this video, you won't be surprised that I applied too much. But again, got it thinned down and applied the tissue paper as smoothly as possible and let it dry. This is just plain old, inexpensive gift wrap tissue paper of a brand I've liked best so far and can't seem to purchase anymore. It did tear a little, and the color ended up darker than I expected it to be. But to show you the translucent effect, I will apply it to a gold roll-off sheet with golden satin glazing liquid because it is tissue paper that I won't be linking to in the description. But just because of the odd way the week worked out, I am recording the voiceover for this after the final paper in this video, in which I'm also using the same tissue paper, which I realized I forgot to mention. A good amount of the adhesive needs to go down on the substrate and then also be applied to the top of the tissue paper, making sure it is well applied top and bottom so it's rather saturated. Wrinkles and bubbles smoothed out to your liking. I don't mind some wrinkles. I think they look interesting. Here it is dry so you can get a better idea of how it actually looks. Translucent lace collage paper. For collage paper number 88, I decided to revisit tissue paper. The tissue paper where I made it opaque and almost transparent with Mars Black fluid acrylic as my opaque. But this time add a lightly tinted translucent background for an organic branchy design. That would be the opaque area. I started painting and stuck with it longer than I probably should have, because this clearly wasn't going to work the way I wanted it. My efforts to make it a little better or more in line with what I was thinking did lead me to my next way to experiment, blotting, to deal with blobby areas of paint and create a more, ethereal look. Unfortunately, I can say in retrospect, I decided to try a larger branch before moving on to just flowers. Although it did cross my mind to have flowers with branches, but as I've said repeatedly recently, when working with a single pull, a multi-layer pull, what's on the bottom will be the top layer, and I didn't want branches on top of flowers. I got out some flowery colors and started with the darker color to create a heart for my flowers, and wasn't sure if I wanted the yellow in the hearts or on the edges of the petals, but figured it would be easier in the center around the heart, and placed my flower parts in random places around the gel plate. This is my 5x7 and it is a gel press brand. I will have links to them and other materials used in this video. I love the effect of clearing off excess paint from my brush this way, especially when there are multiple colors. I added pink blobs for the bulk of my flower petals. This is Liquitex Basics Light Pink. I also used quinacridone magenta and cadmium yellow medium hue. And the brown I was using was a Master's Touch thick body acrylic I got on clearance in raw umber. This didn't quite have the smushy effect I was going for. There's probably a better, more artistic word for that, but smushy works. And each shape was relatively petal shaped, so maybe if I had more smaller ones and did it that way. A quick rollover with the brayer created an interesting texture, but I lost flowers, so I decided to paint on more flowers, not being too representational, wanting them to end up looking, what would be a good word? Not hazy, but that's the best word I can come up with at the moment. But again, I was going for a more translucent look across the board. Obviously my flowers being the least translucent. I think as I went, those last petals would have been perfect, but I still had more paint on the earlier ones. I patted off a little more of the excess, and that's an interesting sheet I pulled off. It reminds me of sweet peas, but I also pulled off most of the flowers. So I decided to use what little paint was left without adding more and create those softer petals I commented on. This section of tonight's video is slightly more detailed, maybe a lot more detailed than some of the typical sections of my weekly 100 collage papers summation wrap-up description videos are. After the 100-day project ends, I would like to get into making videos that are more focused, so it can be more detailed. So be sure to subscribe and let me know what topics you'd like me to start with when I can be more focused. I'm thinking that comparing the gel plate to silicone mats would be both fun and interesting, and something that a number of you will be interested in. After everything was dry, I got out the gloss medium, but I also wanted to have a tint of blue. I had decided to use my phthalo blue because I love it, but I also know a little bit of it goes a long way. I was going to squirt some on the brayer, but decided to use my finger, and that small amount you see there is too much, just so you know. I did roll some of it off. Still seemed a little much. And yes, that is definitely darker, deeper color than I intended. I did add a little more gloss medium, rolled some more excess blue off the brayer before spreading it again. I could tell it was still a little darker than I would like, but I figured it would still turn out pretty, just not quite as translucent as I had hoped. I did have a few more wrinkles than I would have liked. One of the benefits of doing pulls on tissue paper is you can see how well they are touching the plate. I let everything dry and carefully pulled up the tissue paper. As I expected, the blue is stronger than I intended, but it's still rather lovely. But it does overpower the flowers in some areas because they are translucent as I intended. I did have a few little areas stick, so I probably should have let it dry a little longer. That was unfortunate. And yes, darker than I intended, but I'm learning, and I think I learned a lot this time. You can see how it is translucent. You can see some color through it and my fingers. So I think this was a successful experiment. It's lovely. And I learned quite a bit. Thanks for joining me for 7 more collage papers. I hope you are feeling inspired to make your own art. If so, give me a thumbs up. As mentioned, don't forget to subscribe. I will be back next week with 7 more collage papers, along with a daily short with those collage papers. And on Sundays, I post a small art prompt that can be done in an art journal or on paper if you don't have one, because we are better with art.